The great hall of the kingdom was heavy with silence. Tall stone walls rose high, decorated with banners that once told stories of victory, of golden days when this land was feared and respected. But those banners looked old now, faded and torn, hanging like tired memories. The kingdom was no longer as strong as it once was, and everyone knew it. At the far end of the hall, on a high seat carved of black wood, sat the old king. His shoulders were broad, but his back was bent. His hair, once dark and strong, had turned gray, and his beard was like ash. He looked not like a mighty ruler, but like a weary father who had carried too much pain. His eyes were sharp still, though heavy with sorrow, as if every word he spoke cost him a piece of his heart. On this day, the hall was filled with lords, knights, and soldiers. They had been called for council, for the news of invasion spread faster than fire. An enemy from beyond the borders, stronger than any army they had faced before, was marching toward them. No wall, no sword, no shield had been enough to stop them in other lands. All had fallen. And now the kingdom waited its turn. The king stood. The hall grew still. "My people," his voice rang, though it trembled. "We stand at the edge of ruin. The enemy comes with fire and steel. They will tear down our homes. They will take our lands, and they will leave nothing but ashes. I am an old man. I cannot fight as I once did, but there is one hope left to us." Whispers filled the hall. Some leaned forward. Others frowned. The king's hand shook as he rested them on the head of his staff. His voice grew softer, but it carried through the silence like a blade through air. "My daughter." Gasps. Murmurs. Eyes turned toward the shadow at the far corner of the hall, where heavy curtains hid a figure. A shape moved there, tall, still, watching. "You all know the rumors," the king continued. "She was born beneath a red star. She carries marks on her skin that no healer can explain. Her hands are stronger than iron, her eyes, not of this world. Many of you have called her cursed. Many of you have called her monstrous. And I have hidden her away. For years I kept her from you, from the world, because I too feared what she might become." His voice cracked then, and for a moment the hall saw not a king, but a father, broken by his own guilt. "But now," he said, lifting his head, "she is all that remains. I offer her not as a bride for comfort, not as a prize of beauty, but as a warrior. I offer her hand to any man brave enough to stand with her. Together perhaps you may hold back the storm. Together perhaps you may save us all." The hall erupted into noise. Some laughed in disbelief. Some muttered prayers. Others spat curses under their breath. "A monster's daughter," one knight whispered to another. "She will kill any man who touches her," another said. "Better. We surrender than tie our fate to her," an old lord sneered. But none spoke loud enough to reach the king's ears, for though they feared him less now, none dared challenge him openly. The figure in the shadows did not move. The king raised his hand for silence. "I do not force this upon any man, but I ask, who among you will stand with her? Who among you will fight beside the blood of my blood?" The silence that followed was heavier than stone. One by one the knights lowered their heads. The lords looked to the ground. Even the bravest soldiers clenched their fists and said nothing. No one stepped forward. The king's face broke. For the first time in many years, tears filled his eyes. He turned his face aside, ashamed to let them see him weep. It seemed the hall itself was frozen in fear, until one man moved. He was not a lord, nor a knight of high name. His armor was scratched and dented, his cloak plain and torn. A scar ran across his cheek. A mark of battle survived but never sung about. He was no hero from the old songs. He was only a soldier, older than most, his back straight, his eyes steady. He stepped forward and dropped to one knee before the king. "My name is Darren," he said, his voice rough but clear. "I will stand with her. I ask for no gold, no land, no title. I only ask to fight beside her if she will allow it." Gasps echoed through the hall. The king stared at him, eyes wide, as if he could not believe what he had heard. His lips trembled, but no words came. Instead, he looked toward the shadowed figure at the corner. The curtains moved. Slowly, she stepped forward. The princess. Tall she was, taller than most men. Her skin was pale, almost silver under the light of the hall. Strange dark lines ran across her arms like veins of ink, curling into patterns that glowed faintly. Her hair was long, black as night, and her eyes were not the eyes of any human. They burned faintly, a color between gold and fire. Gasps turned to silence as all eyes fell on her. She did not look at her father. She did not look at the lords or knights. She looked only at Darren, the soldier on his knee. "You will fight beside me?" she asked softly. Her voice was low, almost like music played in the dark, a voice of someone who had spoken to shadows all her life. "I will," Darren said, raising his head to meet her gaze. "Not because I do not fear you, but because I believe you are not what they say, and if you are, still I will stand." Her eyes flickered, a strange light passing through them. For the first time her lips trembled, as if she wished to smile but had forgotten how. The king's breath shuddered. His heart, long hardened by war and sorrow, found a small flame of hope. In the silence of the great hall where fear and doubt had lived for so many years, something new was born that day. Not trust. Not yet. But the first step toward it. And though no one else knew it, the fate of the kingdom had already changed. The night after the council was heavy with silence. The torches outside the castle walls burned low, their smoke drifting into the dark sky. While the lords drank and whispered in secret, while soldiers sharpened their blades for battles they feared would never be won, Darren was led through the hidden passages of the castle. 2 guards walked ahead, holding lanterns. Their faces were pale, their steps uneasy. They stopped before a door of black iron, thick and covered with chains. Strange symbols were carved into the wood, as if to remind anyone who entered that what lay inside was dangerous. One guard placed the key into Darren's hand, but did not look at him. "We will not go in," the guard said quickly. "She does not like strangers." Darren nodded. He pushed the key into the lock. The heavy chains groaned as he turned it. The door creaked open. The chamber inside was dim. A single candle burned on a stone table, its small flame trembling in the cold air. The room was not like a princess's chamber. There were no silks, no flowers, no mirrors of gold. It was bare like a prison cell. The only piece of furniture was a simple bed, and even that was covered with coarse blankets. And there, seated on the floor with her back against the wall, was the princess. She wore no crown. Her gown was simple, gray and loose around her tall frame. Around her wrists were shackles, not to hold her down, for the chains hung broken on the floor, but to remind her that she was never free. Her head was bent low, her long black hair falling over her shoulders. When Darren stepped inside, her voice came first, soft and sharp like a blade hidden under cloth. "So, you are the one?" Darren closed the door behind him. The lock clicked, and the sound echoed through the small chamber. He did not walk closer yet, but stood where he was, letting his eyes adjust to the dim light. "Yes," he said calmly, "I am Darren." She lifted her head. Her eyes glowed faintly like embers in the dark. They fixed on him, sharp and searching. She did not blink for a long time, as if she was weighing his soul. "You think you can endure me?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but underneath it he could hear something else. Weariness and perhaps a hidden sadness. Darren's scarred face did not change. "I have endured worse." Her lips curled into the faintest shadow of a smile, though it was bitter more than warm. "That is what they all say before they run." He took one step forward, slow and careful. "I am not here to run." The princess tilted her head. The candlelight caught the strange markings across her arms, dark lines that seemed alive, curling and glowing softly, like veins of fire beneath her skin. They were beautiful in a frightening way, like storms seen far across the sea. "You should know," she said quietly, "when the chains break, I may not be what you hope. I may not even be what I am now. There are things in me I cannot always hold back." Darren took another step forward. "Then I will stand anyway." Her eyes widened a little. She leaned back against the wall, studying him as if he were the first man she could not understand. For years she had seen nothing but fear in the eyes of others. Fear, disgust, pity. But this soldier's gaze was calm. He was not blind to what she was, but he did not flinch. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you not fear me?" Darren lowered himself to sit on the floor, keeping a respectful distance. He placed his sword on his knees and rested his scarred hands on it. "Because fear is useless," he said simply. "It keeps men from doing what must be done. You are not a monster. You are a woman, carrying more than you should. I have fought beside men who were cruel and empty, yet no one chained them. If I must choose, I would rather fight beside someone the world fears than someone whose heart is hollow." The words struck her deeper than he knew. She turned her face away, her long hair covering her glowing eyes. For a moment she said nothing. The candle flickered and the silence was heavy, but it was not the same silence as before. At last she whispered, "I have never spoken with anyone like you." Darren gave a faint smile, though his face was tired. "I have never spoken with a princess before." "We are even." A soft sound escaped her throat, something between a laugh and a sigh. It was the first sound of life in the room that did not belong to chains or silence. For a while, they sat without words. The princess rested her head against the wall, her glowing eyes half closed. Darren leaned back slightly, his hand on his sword, his gaze steady. He did not press her, did not question her, did not demand anything. He simply remained. At last she spoke again. "Do you know my name?" "Not yet," Darren answered. She looked at him, surprised. "They never told you?" "No," he said. "They only said monster. But I did not listen." Her lips trembled. She looked down at her hands, pale and marked with fire veins. For years she had believed her name was buried under whispers, drowned by fear. To hear someone speak of her as if she was more than what the world called her, it was almost too much. "My name," she said slowly, "is Serenia." Darren bowed his head slightly. "Serenia," he repeated, steady and respectful. "Then it is an honor." For the first time in many years, Serenia felt her heart stir, not with power, not with fear, but with something she had thought she would never know again. Hope. The chains lay broken at her feet, but inside, she had always been bound. That night, with one soldier's steady gaze, with one word of respect, a lock inside her heart shifted, and though she did not yet understand it, though the world outside was preparing for war, something new began to grow in the dark, not power, not fury, but the first fragile seed of trust. The sun rose over the kingdom, but its light felt weak, swallowed by heavy clouds. The people in the streets moved like shadows, their voices hushed, their faces pale. Everyone had heard the news. The enemy was close now. Villages at the borders had already burned. Survivors told stories of machines that walked like giants, of soldiers covered in black iron, of fire raining from the sky. Inside the castle, the air was no lighter. The lords argued, their voices sharp and fearful. Some demanded surrender. Some spoke of fleeing with their gold. Few spoke of fighting, and those who did trembled even as they raised their voices. The king sat silent on his throne, his hands gripping the arms of the chair. He listened, but his eyes were far away, as though he could already see the flames consuming his kingdom. Serenia remained in her chamber, though the door was no longer locked. She sat by the window, watching the horizon. Dark smoke rose in the far distance. Her fingers tightened around the cold stone of the window frame, and the faint glow under her skin grew brighter. Darren entered quietly. He had been given no fine armor, no shining blade. He wore the same dented chest plate he always had, and the same scarred sword rested at his side. "You have not eaten," he said gently. Serenia shook her head without looking at him. "I cannot eat when I can smell the burning of villages." Darren stepped closer. He placed a small wooden tray on the table, bread and water, nothing more. "You will need strength. If you mean to fight, you must live to do so." At that, Serenia finally turned her head. Her glowing eyes met his calm ones. "You believe I should fight?" "I believe," Darren said, "that this kingdom will fall without you." Her lips pressed together. "And if I lose myself? If what I carry breaks free?" Darren did not flinch. "Then I will be there." For a long moment, silence hung between them. Then Serenia reached slowly for the bread. She tore a piece and ate, though her hands trembled. Down in the courtyard, soldiers drilled with their weapons, but their movements were weak. The fear in their hearts was heavier than their shields. When Serenia stepped outside for the first time, the yard froze. Every sword lowered. Every whisper stopped. She walked slowly, her tall form impossible to ignore, her strange marks glowing faintly beneath the gray light. The soldiers shrank back. Some crossed themselves, some spat, some muttered curses under their breath. Darren walked beside her, his sword at his hip, his stride steady. His presence was a shield, though his armor was no stronger than theirs. He looked at them all and spoke with a clear voice. "She is not a curse," he said. "She is our blade. If you fear her, then you fear the only chance you have to live." The soldiers shifted uneasily, but none dared speak against him. Serenia stood at the center of the yard. For a moment she closed her eyes. When she opened them, her power stirred. The ground trembled beneath her bare feet. The air shimmered with heat as her hands lifted. A ripple of force burst outward, shaking the shields of the men, rattling the spears in their hands. The stone walls of the courtyard groaned as if struck by thunder. Gasps filled the air. Some soldiers fell to their knees. Others dropped their weapons in shock, and then slowly, Serenia lowered her hands. The glow faded, though her eyes still burned. Her voice was low, steady, and carried across the yard. "This power is not mine to waste," she said. "I will use it for you. For this land, for the people who hate me, and for those who hide from me. But I will not fight alone. If you wish to live, you must fight with me. If you cannot, then step aside." Her words struck like hammers. There was no softness in them, but there was no cruelty either. Only truth. Darren looked at the soldiers. "You heard her. Will you cower, or will you stand?" At first no one spoke, but slowly, one by one, men raised their swords again, not with the strength of faith, but with the trembling resolve of those who saw no other way. It was enough. That night, Serenia sat once more by her window. The glow beneath her skin pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. Darren sat nearby, sharpening his sword with slow, careful strokes. The sound of stone on steel filled the silence. "Why do you trust me so easily?" she asked suddenly. Darren did not look up. "Because I have nothing left to lose," she frowned. "Nothing?" He paused. His eyes grew distant. "Once I had a family, a wife, a child. They were taken by war, by men who called themselves human, who called themselves righteous. I learned then that monsters do not always have claws or glowing eyes. Sometimes they look just like us." Serenia's heart ached at his words. She turned her face away, ashamed of the tears that welled in her burning eyes. "I am sorry," she whispered. Darren set down his sword and looked at her. "Do not be sorry. Just fight with me." She looked back at him, her gaze steady now, and for the first time in her life she felt the weight of her power lessen, not because it grew weaker, but because she no longer carried it alone. The war drums echoed in the distance that night, rolling over the hills. The enemy was near. Torches blazed on the horizon like a river of fire. The kingdom trembled. But in the castle, for the first time, Serenia did not tremble. She had been chained all her life. Now at last she was ready to break free. The drums of war grew louder with each passing hour. From the castle walls the horizon glowed red, not with the beauty of dawn, but with the fires of villages already burning. Smoke coiled into the sky, dark and endless, as if the heavens themselves were being choked. Inside the castle the soldiers prepared, though their movements were stiff and uncertain. They sharpened blades, fitted arrows, and whispered prayers, but their eyes were empty of hope. Every man there knew the truth. They were not ready. And above them all, in the tower chamber where she had lived in silence, Serenia sat with her hands bound once more in iron, not because she could not break them, but because she had chosen not to. The king had begged her. "Not yet," he had said, voice heavy with fear. "If you let go now, I do not know if I will get my daughter back. Wait. Wait until the moment we need you most." So she waited. But every breath was heavy. Every sound of the drums outside struck her heart like a hammer. She could feel the enemy drawing closer, step by step. She could almost hear the screams of the people who would soon die if she remained in chains. The door opened. Darren entered. His armor was scratched, his face smeared with dust, but his eyes were steady as always. He looked at her wrists, at the cruel iron biting into her pale skin. His jaw tightened. "You should not be chained," he said quietly. Serenia lifted her gaze to him. Her glowing eyes burned brighter than the candlelight. "It is not the chains that hold me, Darren. It is my father's fear." Darren stepped closer. He dropped his sword onto the table with a sharp clatter. His voice was low but firm. "Fear will kill this kingdom before the enemy does. If you wait, it will be too late. Serenia, it is time." Her lips parted, but no words came. For so long she had been hidden, locked away, told that she was dangerous, cursed, a mistake. For so long she had believed it. And now one man asked her to believe in something else. Her heart pounded. Her skin glowed brighter, the lines under her flesh pulsing like fire in veins of glass. The chains groaned as her strength rose. "Darren," she whispered, her voice breaking, "if I lose myself, then I will find you," he said firmly, cutting her words short. His eyes did not leave hers. "I will not run. Not from you." Tears stung her eyes. For a moment her breath trembled, and then she let go. Serenia lifted her hands once more, and with a cry that shook the heavens she unleashed her power in full. Golden fire swept across the field, tearing through machines, scattering soldiers, shattering the darkness with light. When the blaze faded, silence fell. The battlefield was broken, the enemy fleeing, their machines nothing but twisted ruins. Smoke and ash hung heavy in the air, but the kingdom still stood. On the walls, soldiers shouted in disbelief. Some wept, some fell to their knees, their voices rising in cheers. "The princess!" they cried. With a sound like thunder, the chains shattered. The iron links burst apart and flew across the chamber, clattering against the stone walls. Power surged through her body, shaking the floor beneath her. The candle flame flared high and then snuffed out, leaving the room lit only by the glow of her skin. Her hair lifted as though caught in an unseen wind. The dark lines across her arms burned with golden light. Her eyes blazed, no longer faint but bright like twin suns. She rose from the chair, taller than before, every step humming with force. Darren did not move away. He stood firm, though the air itself bent around her, pressing against him like a storm. His cloak snapped in the wind that came from nowhere. His hair whipped across his scarred face. But still his eyes stayed locked on hers, and in his steady gaze, Serenia found herself again. The power roared through her, wild and endless, but it did not drown her. For the first time, she was not afraid of it. For the first time, she did not fight against it. She embraced it. She was not a monster. She was not cursed. She was her father's daughter. She was the blood of her people. She was the blade they had hidden, the shield they had chained. Now she was free. The castle shook as if it knew. Soldiers in the courtyard looked up, fear and awe in their eyes as the tower above them pulsed with golden light. The glow poured from the windows like fire, painting the night with hope and terror alike. "She is loose," a guard shouted. "She will destroy us all," another cried. But Darren's voice rang out strong and clear, carrying across the stone walls. "She is not a monster," he shouted. "She is your princess, and she is the only reason you will live to see another dawn." The words struck the soldiers, silencing them. They stared at the tower, waiting, trembling. Then Serenia stepped into the open air. The chains still clung to her wrists, broken and dangling, a reminder of what she had been. But the glow of her skin burned brighter than the torches, her hair flowing like a dark river against the night. Every step she took left the air trembling. Men dropped their swords at the sight. Some fell to their knees. None dared to speak. She looked down at them all, her glowing eyes filled not with cruelty but with sorrow. Her voice was strong, carrying like thunder across the courtyard. "I was born beneath a red star. You called me cursed. You called me monster. You hid me, chained me, despised me. And still, I will fight for you. Not because you deserve it, but because this land is mine too. This is my home, and I will not see it burn." Her words echoed, and the silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the distant drums of the enemy. Then she lifted her hands. Power burst from her palms, a golden wave that rippled through the air. The soldiers staggered, shielding their eyes, but when the light faded, they felt something new burning in their chests. Not fear, not despair, but the faint spark of hope. For the first time, they saw not a monster. They saw their weapon. They saw their princess. And as Serenia stood tall, with Darren at her side, the kingdom began to believe. The night was filled with fire. From the walls of the kingdom, soldiers watched in horror as the enemy finally came into view. Across the fields, torches burned like rivers of flame. Machines of iron rolled forward, their wheels crushing the earth, their engines growling like beasts. Behind them marched men in black armor, their banners dark as storm clouds. The ground shook beneath their steps, and the air itself seemed to grow heavy with their presence. The soldiers on the walls trembled. Their hands gripped their spears, but their hearts beat with fear. The king stood among them, his old eyes wet with sorrow, knowing his army was too weak, too small. And then from the tower, the light appeared. Serenia stepped into the night, her glowing skin casting golden fire across the stone. The broken chains still hung from her wrists, but they no longer bound her. Her dark hair lifted as though caught in an unseen wind. Every step she took toward the gates made the soldiers fall silent, their fear shifting into awe. Darren walked beside her, his scarred hand resting on the hilt of his sword. He did not shine with light or burn with power, but his calm stride was its own kind of strength. Where Serenia was fire, he was stone. Together they were something the kingdom had never seen before. The king's voice rang out, cracked but strong. Open the gates! The heavy doors groaned as they swung wide. The army outside roared with laughter, thinking the kingdom had already surrendered. But their laughter died when they saw her. Serenia stepped into the open field. The wind howled around her, carrying sparks of golden light. She raised her head high, her burning eyes fixed on the enemy. A silence fell across both armies. Then the enemy gave the order to attack. Iron machines rolled forward, spewing fire. Arrows darkened the sky. Black-armored soldiers charged with swords raised. The earth shook beneath the weight of war, and Serenia lifted her hands. A blast of golden fire erupted from her palms, striking the ground before her. The earth split open with a deafening crack. Machines toppled into the pit, their wheels spinning helplessly as they sank. Soldiers screamed, their charge broken. The sky lit up with her power, brighter than lightning, louder than thunder. The men on the walls gasped. The soldiers in the courtyard fell to their knees. Even the king who had once called her monstrous could only whisper in awe. But Serenia did not pause. She stepped forward, her power flowing like a river from her hands. Arrows melted in the air before they could strike her. Flames from the enemy's weapons curled around her but never touched her skin. With each step she pushed back the tide of iron and fire. And always Darren was at her side. Where her power split the ground and broke the machines, he faced the enemy soldiers who slipped past her wrath. His sword flashed in the golden light, cutting down those who dared approach. He fought without fear, his every movement calm and certain. Once a soldier in black swung a heavy axe at Serenia's back. Before she could turn, Darren stepped between them, his scarred arms blocking the blow with his shield. He shoved the enemy aside, his sword piercing through armor. "Keep moving," he shouted, his voice strong above the roar. Serenia's chest heaved. Her power burned inside her like fire trying to escape its cage. She could feel the glow spreading across her body, filling every part of her until she thought she might break. But she saw Darren's steady figure, heard his voice, and it anchored her. "I will not stop," she whispered, and the ground trembled as she unleashed another wave of power. The enemy fell back. Their machines twisted and broken, their soldiers scattered in fear. They had come expecting an easy victory. Instead, they faced a force they could not understand. Still, the battle was not without cost. Serenia's knees trembled. Her body shook as cracks of light spread across her skin, as if her form could not contain what burned within. Pain lanced through her arms, sharp and searing. She gasped, nearly falling. Darren was there. He caught her before she touched the ground, his arm strong around her shoulders. "Steady," he said, his voice low, his face close to hers. "Do not fall now. They need you." Her glowing eyes flickered, dimming with exhaustion. "I cannot hold it." "Yes, you can," Darren said firmly. "Not for them. For yourself. Prove you are more than chains." Her breath caught. For a moment her vision blurred. But then she clenched her fists, the glow returning stronger than before. She rose to her feet, her broken chains clattering against the stone. The enemy saw her stand again and faltered. Their fear spread like fire through dry grass. "Our princess." But Serenia did not hear them. She sank to her knees, her chest heaving, her body trembling with pain. The glow dimmed, leaving only faint sparks across her skin. Darren knelt beside her, his hand on her shoulder. His voice was steady, calm, and full of pride. "You did it." Tears welled in her glowing eyes. They still fear me," Darren shook his head. "No, not anymore. They saw you fight for them. They saw you bleed for them. Fear will turn to trust as long as you keep standing." Serenia looked at him, her heart heavy yet lighter than it had ever been. For the first time in her life, she felt not only chains and whispers, she felt purpose. And though the war was not over, though greater battles still lay ahead, one truth was clear. The kingdom had found its hope. The battlefield was quiet at last. Smoke drifted in heavy clouds above the broken machines, and the ground was black with ash. Crows circled in the sky, their cries sharp and hollow. The air smelled of iron and fire, of death. Serenia sat in the ruins, her hands trembling in her lap. The glow of her skin had faded, leaving faint sparks along her arms like dying embers. Her hair clung to her face, damp with sweat. Every breath was a struggle, as if her body had been torn apart from within. Darren stood near her, his sword still in hand, watching the horizon for signs of the enemy. His armor was cracked, his face streaked with blood, but his eyes were steady. At last he turned to her. "The field is ours," he said softly. "You did it." Her lips parted, but no sound came. She looked down at her hands. The broken chains still dangled from her wrists, stained with soot. Her fingers shook as if the fire inside her had burned too deep. "I destroyed them," she whispered, her voice raw. But at what cost? Darren knelt before her. His scarred hand rested gently on hers, steadying the tremor. "The cost was their fear, not your soul. You fought for them. That is what matters." Her eyes burned, not with golden light, but with tears. For years she had been told she was cursed, a danger, a monster. And now, though she had saved the kingdom from ruin, the weight of those words still pressed against her heart. From the walls of the city, soldiers and townsfolk began to gather. They looked at her with wide eyes. Some still trembled, unsure if they should kneel in thanks or run in fear. But one man stepped forward, the king. He walked slowly, his crown heavy on his gray head. His old eyes were wet, his hands shaking as he approached. For years he had hidden her, chained her, whispered prayers of regret over her birth. But now he stood before her not as a ruler but as a father. "Serenia," he said, his voice breaking. "My daughter." Her breath caught. She looked up at him, her glowing eyes dim with exhaustion. For so long she had dreamed of hearing those words, yet now they felt too heavy to bear. "You chained me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You called me monster." The king's face crumpled. He dropped to his knees before her, his crown slipping into the dirt. "I was wrong. I was weak. I feared what I did not understand. And for that I stole your life. I cannot undo it. I cannot ask your forgiveness. But I can stand before you now and call you what you are, my blood, my hope, my daughter." Gasps spread through the soldiers. No king had ever knelt before his child. But Serenia saw no crown, no throne, only a father broken by his own mistakes. Her tears fell, hot against her pale cheeks. Slowly, painfully, she reached out her trembling hand and touched his face. "If I am your daughter," she said softly, "then let me be more than your shame." The king pressed his hand over hers, his tears falling onto her fingers. "You are more than my shame. You are my salvation," the soldiers saw, the people heard. And in that moment, the whispers of monster began to fade. That night, the kingdom lit no fires of celebration. The streets were quiet, heavy with the weight of the dead. Families searched for their sons. Mothers wept for their children. The victory had been real, but so had the cost. Serenia was taken to her chamber, her body too weak to stand. Darren carried her himself, his strong arms steady even as her head fell against his shoulder. He laid her gently on the bed, covering her with a coarse blanket. She looked up at him, her glowing eyes dim but steady. "Why do you stay?" she whispered. "You could leave now. You have no chains here." Darren sat at her side, his sword resting across his knees. "Because I gave my word. Because you are not alone anymore. And because—" He paused, his voice low, almost too quiet to hear. "Because I believe in you." Her heart ached at his words. She turned her face away, afraid of what he might see in her eyes. For so long she had known only fear and anger, but with him near, something new had taken root inside her. Something fragile, something dangerous. The night passed slowly. Outside, the wounded groaned, the priests prayed, and the guards whispered of the next attack. For though the enemy had fallen back, everyone knew they would return stronger. And in her chamber, Serenia dreamed. In her dream, she saw fire spreading across the land, devouring every tree, every house, every soul. She walked through the flames, her hands burning with golden light, her heart torn between rage and sorrow. She heard voices, her father calling her cursed, the lords whispering of monsters, the soldiers crying out in fear. But then another voice broke through. "Calm, steady. I will find you," it said. She turned, and in the fire stood Darren, his scarred hand reaching toward her. His eyes were steady, his voice sure. And for the first time, the flames did not frighten her. She woke with a gasp, her skin glowing faintly in the dark. Darren was still there, seated at her side, his head bowed in half-sleep, his sword across his knees. For a moment, she simply watched him. And for the first time in her life, she did not feel chained. She felt safe, the enemy was not gone. The war was not over. But inside her heart, a new strength grew. Not the wild, burning fire of her power, but something softer, something stronger. Hope. And she knew then, whatever battles lay ahead, she would not face them alone. The kingdom did not rest for long. Only 3 nights after the first battle, The horns of war sounded again. From the high walls, soldiers saw the enemy return, greater in number, darker in strength. Their machines were larger now, iron beasts with burning eyes, their armies stretched across the horizon like a black sea. The people wept. The lords whispered of surrender. Even the king's hands shook as he gripped the edge of the walls. But Serenia did not tremble. She stood on the battlements, her long hair flowing in the wind, her glowing eyes fixed on the approaching horde. Though her body still ached from the last battle, though her veins burned with the weight of her power, she held herself tall. Beside her stood Darren, scarred and steady, his hand resting on his sword. He looked at her, his calm gaze never wavering. "This is it," he said quietly. She nodded. "Yes, one way or another it ends today." The enemy's drums thundered. The machines roared. The black-armored soldiers raised their swords, their voices rising in a war cry that shook the earth, and then silence. The king stepped forward. His voice, though cracked with age, carried across the walls. "My people," he cried. "For years I hid my daughter. I chained her. I called her cursed. But now I see the truth. She is no curse. She is our light. She is our strength. Stand with her and stand for this land." The soldiers raised their weapons. The people on the walls cried out. Fear still lived in their hearts, but now it burned beside something stronger: faith. The gates opened. Serenia walked forward, her broken chains clinking softly at her wrists. Each step echoed like thunder, each breath glowing brighter. She stepped onto the battlefield, Darren at her side, the army behind her. The enemy laughed. They thought her just one woman, no matter how bright she burned, but their laughter faded when she raised her hands. Golden fire burst from her palms, soaring into the sky. The light spread across the battlefield, painting the dark night with dawn. The enemy shielded their eyes, blinded by her power. And then the battle began. The machines roared forward, spitting fire. Serenia met them head-on. With a cry that shook the heavens, she sent waves of golden energy crashing into their iron shells. The ground split, fire poured from the cracks, and the machines fell into the earth, their screams like dying beasts. Soldiers in black charged, but Darren was there. His sword flashed in the golden light, his shield holding strong. Where Serenia was fire, he was stone, cutting down those who dared reach her. But the enemy was endless. For every machine that fell, 2 more took its place. For every soldier who died, 10 more rose. Slowly, painfully, the kingdom's army was pushed back. Serenia's chest heaved, her body shook. The glow spreading too far, cracks of light breaking across her skin. She cried out, dropping to her knees. The power inside her threatened to burst, to consume her whole. "Serenia!" Darren caught her, his arm steadying her trembling frame. "I cannot hold it," she gasped, her glowing eyes flickering. "It will break me." "Yes, you can," he said firmly. His hand cupped her face, his scarred thumb brushing her tear-streaked cheek. "You are not a monster. You are not cursed. You are Serenia. And you are stronger than this." Her breath trembled. His voice cut through the storm inside her, and slowly, painfully, she rose again. The glow spread fully across her body now, no longer cracks but a flood of light. Her hair lifted high, her eyes blazing like suns. She raised her hands, and the battlefield froze. Every soldier, every machine, every man and woman stopped and stared. Serenia let go. The fire poured out of her. Not wild, not uncontrolled, but steady, guided by her will. A wave of golden light swept across the field, burning through machines, shattering weapons, scattering armies. The sky itself lit with her power, brighter than day, until the enemy was nothing but shadows fleeing before the dawn. When the light faded, silence fell. The battlefield lay broken. The machines were ash, the soldiers scattered, their banners torn and burning. The enemy was gone. Serenia stood in the center of the field, her chest heaving, her skin dimming, the glow fading at last. She swayed, her body weak, and would have fallen if not for Darren's strong arms catching her. "It's over," he whispered, his voice steady, his eyes full of pride. Her lips trembled. She looked at him, tears glimmering in her fading glow. I am still me?" Darren's hand brushed her hair back from her face. "You are more than you have ever been." The soldiers of the kingdom poured from the gates, their cries rising into the sky. They shouted her name, not in fear but in reverence. "Serenia, our princess, our queen of light." The king came forward, his crown in his trembling hands. With tears streaming down his face, he placed it gently on her head. No longer cursed, he said, his voice breaking, but blessed. Blessed to save us all. Serenya's glowing eyes dimmed to soft embers. She looked at her father, at the people, at Darren holding her close. And for the first time in her life, she felt free. No chains, no whispers, only light. The sun rose at last over the battlefield, bright and golden. The kingdom stood, scarred but alive, and in the heart of it all stood Serenya, the princess once called Monster, now their savior. The final dawn had come.